Hi, everybody. Hope you had a great coffee break. So now we will follow up with the discussion about use cases, and we will talk about DAOs. There is a lot of mystery in the audience that I recognize. Some of the people know what are DAOs very well. Some of the people do not recognize or cannot imagine what a DAO is. So let's clarify how are the DAOs used and what do they actually do. So first, the abbreviation stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. But when looking at practice, the DAOs themselves are neither decentralized or autonomous, but they are still organizations. They are, in fact, internet-native organization. What does that really mean, one might ask? It's actually an organization or a corporate structure deployed on the internet in a form of smart contract, which enables like two key things. One of them is transparent voting on the decisions, and the DAO itself, the smart contract, secures also organization assets. When we are looking at the types of DAOs in practice, we recognize four categories. The first one I would like to mention is called governance DAO. There have been a lot of decentralized protocols being created over the course of last 2 years. For example, like Compound or Uniswap. And these decentralized protocols are running autonomously on blockchain. There are still teams developing those protocols, but they're on the development side. On the operation side, there is always a DAO established to control such protocol. So let's look very concretely on one example. For example, the Uniswap governance. The way how it works in practice is for a change or for a proposal to pass a change on Uniswap, it has to go through 3 steps. The first one is called temperature vote, then there is a consensus vote, and then there is a final on-chain proposal. So as soon as there is an idea being created on how Uniswap should either spend the treasury assets or do a protocol change, like introduce new fees or upgrade the smart contract, there is an official discussion started on forums, which results in a temperature check. And that's like very initial voting, whether this change is going to be accepted or whether it has a wide community support. It's very easy to issue a temperature vote. After the temperature vote passes, it is a strong signal for the DAO, OK, there is a proposal that we should take seriously, and an official discussion on the Uniswap forum is being established together with analyzing all the impacts and preparing the implementation for the for the on-chain decision. So all these steps are concluded by the consensus vote, which after passing, then an on-chain vote is established. This temperature and consensus voting is done on a platform called Snapshot. It doesn't represent, so a vote transaction doesn't represent an actual on-chain transaction, because if you look at how much the transaction costs on Ethereum, it's pretty much thousands of dollars or hundreds or thousands of dollars per one vote transaction. So unless unless the change you want to propose is the real change you want everybody to approve, it doesn't make sense to go fully on-chain. But as soon as there is an agreement and high probability that that change might be implemented, there is an on-chain proposal issued, and the people are voting on it. There is, in terms of the Uniswap concretely, for a proposal to pass, it has to accept 40 million votes. There has to be 40 million token holders voting for the proposal to pass. Today, it's worth around $400 million US, but if we look at the total share on the market, it's only around 4%. Coming back to the categories, we are seeing the governance structure that we have just described, and then the second type is investment DAOs. Naturally, if there are money on the internet, people want to invest this money. For example, we have examples like Metacartel DAO or Flamingo DAO that are investment-focused DAOs. Very concretely, Flamingo DAO is a very famous DAO that invests into NFT assets. It raised $8 million in capital. Today it owns 215 CryptoPunks and 22 bored apes. And the value of the DAO is estimated for more over $1 billion. We also recognize non-profit DAOs, for example, like Ukraine DAO, that raised $7 million to support Ukraine in the conflict against Russia. And also we recognize clubs. Clubs are club DAOs or social DAOs are DAOs formed around specific social activity. For example, participation to a concrete club, like for example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, or Friends with Benefits, or other. There is a real DAO called Friends with Benefits DAO. Anyway, when we look at the amount of assets that are managed by the DAOs, we are seeing somewhere around 10 billion in total. It has grown 10x since the last year. And we are seeing this growth to continue in a similar fashion moving forward. The growth of the assets is mostly driven by the amount of assets in treasuries of the decentralized governance protocol DAOs. So DAOs, as we have described, are organizations that are internet native. But there are still organizations with organizational-like problems, typically in a new code. And how does that look like in practice? For example, we described the voting scenarios. There is a quorum on 4% of the total supply on Uniswap. It's very little comparing to engagement in the traditional companies. And that such a low engagement is often recognized also in other type of DAOs. We will have a DAO operator here from the Opium protocol. Andre, he will come on the stage shortly, who will explain more on a day-to-day operational basis how a DAO is operating and what is his experience with operating such platform. And we will also have Jan, who is part of another DAO, who can also share more details. So low engagement is very big problem currently in the DAO landscape. And it has materially two, I would say, a risk that it is causing. The first one is there is a high risk of mismanagement of treasury assets, because if you have low engagement on voting and there is a malicious transaction or malicious vote issued to release assets from treasury, it can be easily manipulated, because one might borrow the assets from a lending protocol, or the value of assets he can gain by attacking the DAO is higher than the amount of stake that he has to put to the voting. And also it's connected to risk of hostile takeovers, where you can pretty much change the admin contract you can change the administrator of the DAO as soon as you are able to reach the quorum. So that's the two major challenges we are seeing. There are also other challenges that are related to operations. Typically, like in traditional companies, we are seeing ineffective onboarding process. Team coordination is difficult, especially team coordination over 10 people is really difficult. So currently, the DAOs could be compared to SMEs. The participation of full-time contributors is somewhere between like 10 to 100 people maximum. Coordinating over 100 people is super difficult and super ineffective. We are also seeing a new type of challenges for the DAO investors, for example, and that's pseudo-anonymous team. For example, let's take a concrete case called Solan. It's a decentralized protocol on Solana used for lending. There is currently $1 billion locked in lending, but actually nobody knows who the founders and operators behind the DAO are. So everybody recognizes them as a Lego Cactus or 0x Router, but it's pretty much their Twitter names. And what is quite interesting is that VCs, tier 1 VCs, focus on crypto, are very happy to invest into such teams. They don't really need to know the real personality. And we have also invested in such deal. So I would like to invite on stage Andre and Jan. Guys. Andrei Belyakov is the founder of Opium Protocol and also core contributor to the Opium Protocol DAO. Jan Březina is the founder of consulting sub-DAO of Bankless DAO. Welcome, guys, on stage.
Thank you.
Please introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, I'm Andrei. I'm a founder of Opium Protocol. That's a funny name, but it's a very serious product. Decentralized derivatives, financial derivatives. Now we have a lot of options, futures, CDSs, and we have tons of professional look products. So normally I speak about derivatives, but happy to speak about DAO, of course.
And I'm Jan. As was mentioned, we sometimes use the pseudonyms in Web3. So I'm Punkar, actually, in the DAO. So that's probably the name I am mostly known in Web3. But I don't mind to connect my Web2 and Web3 name. So I'm founder of Bankless Consulting, which is a sub-DAO of a Bankless DAO. And we basically created the professional layer for a Bankless DAO, which has 21,000 members. And we basically, I would say, took the best members and the one which has the experience and knowledge. And we are trying to provide basically the support to other DAOs with their creation, growth, or scale.
So thank you guys for a short introduction. So Jan or Punkar has already started introduction of his DAO. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how does the DAO look like? How is it structured? How does your day-to-day operation in such a structure look like?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, we are part of the Bankless DAO. Bankless DAO is one of the largest DAO in the space. 21,000 members. It's a social DAO, so it's very similar to Friends with Benefits in that sense. And within the DAO, we do have because you mentioned that also in the challenges, you cannot really manage that many people very easily. So we basically break down the DAO into sub-DAOs or projects. And one of the projects which I'm leading with some of my colleagues is basically the Bankless Consulting. And in the Bankless Consulting, it's very traditional because we trying to provide really the professional services. We try to have really the project management there, deliver good services and outcomes. And we are trying to structure it in the way that it will be delivering the value, and we have not. So I think that's also good to mention. We have not issue a token or something which will give us maybe even some time just to figure out. We right from the beginning trying to get the revenue in, start supporting other DAOs, and so on. So it's much more kind of natural progress. Compared to that, when I work for the main DAO, it's 21,000 members. A lot of things are happening on the forums. So it's like a public forum. So basically the big DAO, it's managed through proposals where everyone can come, everyone can comment, and through that we are getting approval for doing something, and it can be very challenging.
Yeah.
Get the alignment with that many members. It's not that easy. But let me just pause there.
Yeah. So Andrei, what are your experiences?
We have a few DAOs. Most interesting is the protocol DAO. So it means that the protocol itself. So what is the protocol? A protocol is a set of smart contracts which should be managed. And it's not managed by anyone, any person or team or group. It's managed by this DAO, which is more than 1,000 owners, and they need to vote, they need to manage to change every parameter of the protocol, to change the protocol actually. So a little bit like Compound, but it's fully decentralized, and it has pros and cons. I can speak later about it, but it's fully decentralized from very beginning. So basically the cons, it's very difficult to do anything. You need to always have voting. And the pros that it's we have also can speak later. We have pretty cool system with optimistic voting, and then actually quite proof or safe there is no central counterparty which can manipulate or do something with it. So, and we have another few DAOs. Most interesting probably it's a team DAO. There's a decentralized team of developers who are contributing, writing code on GitHub. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Somebody doing a lot, sometimes somebody is joining. But it's also managed through the DAO. The payments, the contributions, everything is managed decentralized. So there's no central party which manage that. So that's also pretty interesting.
So the developers are getting paid through the DAO, yeah?
Different DAO, yes.
Okay, yeah, through the team DAO, yeah? So the team
yeah.
DAO works for the Opium Protocol main DAO, and the Opium Protocol main DAO approves funding for the team DAO, and the team DAO is paying developers.
No, team DAO, they made investment rounds, you know, and they manage this money. They vote how to spend it, if we need to hire someone, if we need to decrease salaries, and so on and so on. So in the protocol DAO, it's just like a compound. All the token holders, they manage anything or everything with the protocol.
Okay. So Jan, you mentioned there is 19,000 people involved in the Bankless DAO in total. How does that work in practice? Can you extract, or is the 19,000 people actively involved? Because from my view, it seems like it's a lot of people, and I see the challenges as I described initially. It's really difficult to coordinate such a large amount of people. So can you elaborate on how you are actually working with such massive crowd?
Yeah, maybe actually one point what I would like to mention to that. It's very interesting like how the growth actually works. So during the bull market, you have exponential growth of people just visiting a DAO. It's basically like when we look at the data, like we have people who just like come in and read something. They are not actively participating, but because of the bull market, they just want to be in. And during like more like bearish market, we actually getting less people, but those people are actively participating. We can see that like people are at the forums actually posting or in voice channels on Discord, which is basically the thing what is ruling the DAO. They actually like come to the calls and actively like put their opinions and maybe help leading the projects. So during the bull market, like to, run the DAO or organize that many people, you need to basically take few of those people out of the equation because they are not actively participating. They are there just to kind of watch. And maybe something will, pique their interest and they will start, but, you basically trying to organize really the members who are active. So, and you do that, as I mentioned already, through forums, through public forums. That's for the like bigger initiatives. So if you need budget approval, so it can be in Bankless DAO like budget for the next season. So basically, you submit a proposal. This is what we will spend the money for, and then people can comment on it, why you are spending money on this and not on that. Yeah. And we are basically going through the discussion, and we agree on some of those points, and then there is the final vote for the final budget. And that way we get the budget in, and then when the budget is approved for the season, which is 3 months, then it gets distributed to the teams, what was in the proposal, and those teams start organizing themselves. So we basically start like breaking it down. And I think it's very similar to traditional organization. The budget gets approved like for the organization and then distributed basically down, where the smaller teams organize themselves.
Okay. And can you elaborate, Jan, on how does the typical approval process look like in terms of like engagement of the members of the DAO?
Yeah.
Like how many, what's the % of people involved in the decision making, and how long does it take actually to approve the transaction? Because it seems to me it may take a lot of time.
Yeah, like you mentioned that like Uniswap example, or like, even that 4%, it's sometimes hard to reach in general, like across the ecosystem. And like, I will probably now like really speak more general, like that 4% of tokens might not be even held within the core team, like within the, like all the contributors within the team. It might be held just by like small or large investors who are actually not like in the DAO itself, like day by day. So then it's like the people who are actually issuing the proposal and will be doing the work, like they comment actively, but they cannot actually approve it for themselves, kind of thing. So I think that number is kind of like what you said, like correct. Like if it's budget approval, it's usually get more traction. So I would say even like 10% people actually vote or like participate. If it's more like you mentioned risk parameters updates, that's usually like half of the percent. Because like people first maybe don't even understand like what that change will actually, you know, do. And they just like, there is usually multiple of those proposals like per month. So that's maybe much less.
Okay, thank you. So Andre, if I want to get involved in the OBU protocol DAO, what is the best way to start with?
You're already involved.
Okay, we are investors, of course, but if there is a newcomer joining.
Yes, that's a very good question, because I think our DAOs are a little bit different, because Bankless DAO, of course, it's complicated, but it's clear for everyone. You can take a random person and explain what it is, what it does, so on. When it comes to management of derivative protocol, it's very specialized knowledge, and it's a lot of aspects of this knowledge, and you need basically a lot of deep specialists, developers, financial specialists, so on and so on. So we don't want to advertise it and try to onboard as many people as possible, but we want to get the best specialists in certain expertise. And we're also now talking about sub-DAOs, that some part of the community can only vote on financial parameters if they really understand it well, and somebody can vote about the marketing, some other group can vote on other specifics. They may also have different rewards for it, and when I say rewards, it's a government rewards, so they work for the protocol, they improve this public good, make it better, so they receive more rights in this community, in this public good. So that's how it works. And answering your question, the best way to go to forum, because we have forum where everything is discussed, and it's the guys were trying to split it into subsections, subcategories, and then you read. But again, if you want to go from scratch for such specific, sophisticated protocol, probably you can speak about marketing, you can speak about like UX, UI things, and that's been discussed. But discussing the risk parameters of the protocol, you need to have the knowledge, and that's the main challenge for such protocols, to attract people. It may be a few people, it may be only 100 people, but it's much better than 10,000 people. But if they have deep knowledge and they can have a good discussion, that's a real goal. So,
Okay.
But answering your question, there is forum, everything is open source, GitHub, everything is available. You need to have certain level, and everything is open.
Okay, so it's pretty much up to me to put all my energy or focus, if I'm interested into the Opium protocol DAO, to study, and then I can pretty much contribute on the forum and eventually create a proposal.
Like everybody else, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And it's funny to see, because sometimes there is a good idea, and only few people, like a very small amount of people voting for it, because we have two layers. So may I say about this? It's kind of optimistic voting. First, you vote without spending gas on transactions, and then it's brought to the blockchain. But if it's brought with mistake, or somebody is trying to manipulate, you can always pull the plug.
Pull the plug.
Pull the plug.
Okay.
Exactly, and start on-chain voting, so, but you need to pay for it. So everybody who can pay a little bit, they can just say, okay, this is manipulation. So, and we see that sometimes people are not voting for good idea, and if there is some crazy idea, that a lot of people step in and say, no, 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 this is...
Okay.
And my assumption that a good idea, everybody agree and say, okay, I don't need to vote, it's going well, so it's fine. So you cannot measure by the participation all the time. So sometimes people just lazy and say, yeah, it's going right, so why should I bother?
So initially, my perception was the DAOs had like very flat organizational structure, and everybody was involved, or people could be involved in voting on any type of decisions. Right now, we are getting introduced to the sub-DAO concept, which create like separate teams. What are the sub-DAOs that you recognize are like a good separation of concerns within the DAO or responsibilities? Yeah, Andrei.
Exactly what I said. So we have financial logic, we have game theory logic, we have technical implementation, and we have all kind of soft skill like marketing, UI, UX. That's exactly categories.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to the challenges, in addition to what we have talked about, like the low engagement of voting, what are like the other key problems you foresee today, Jan?
Yeah, so I think it was mentioned in DeFi as well, like education. I think it's key piece to this. Like people who wants to come into DAO needs to know like how to come and what they should expect. And then I think the DAO will be getting like contributors which actually can contribute. Because what I feel it's the challenge here now, it's, you mentioned like flat organization, it's permissionless, anyone can join. That means like that not only people who actually wants to contribute will be joining, and that's not for a benefit of the DAO.
Yeah.
Like to have 30,000 members doesn't mean that like you are held to DAO. Like that just means that a lot of people got in, but doesn't need to mean that like you actually do more stuff than a DAO who has like 100 contributors, but you know, as Andre mentioned, like you need to be technical, you need to know what you are doing, and you need to contribute, you know, and that's sometimes much better. So I think, you know, education about like actually what to expect from like joining a DAO and like make some like reflection on it, like will be super helpful because yeah, the engagement and like the contribution in DAO is one of the challenges. Yeah, I think that's the main challenge.
Are you feeling that the onboarding process and the amount of people which is difficult to coordinate is because there is not enough good tooling to support this case? Or do you think the tooling already exists, it's just the people are not aware of it?
So, yeah, the tooling is not great.
Okay. So just tell us, like, what kind of tools you use and how do you use them? I think it's very valuable.
Like, I think the tooling is not great. Like, you know, like every DAO, almost every DAO runs on Discord, which is like basically the like, you know, communication layer for DAOs. It used to be for gamers, now it's for gamers and DAOs. And whenever Discord is down, basically all the DAOs like stop working. So I think we need something there. We need like diversify a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like, you know, if that tool disappear, like the DAOs will disappear with it. So I think that's one thing, and also it's not perfect for what we are doing. It's usually a lot of noise. It's hard to like actually manage projects through that and so on. So that's one tool I would mention. There are many, but there are many tools which are actually getting created for like governance, voting, structure of the DAO into the sub-DAOs or pods, and I think those teams actually like doing very good job to like solve particular use cases. So on that level, I think we are getting more good tooling, especially like at the Ethereum layer. But also those tools, I think, needs to be adopted like broadly to be tested and probably adjusted.
Okay.
So that's probably my take on tooling.
Yeah, on Discord, I really don't like Discord. It's terrible. So imagine there is 20,000 people in like one group chat. This is pretty much how Discord looks like. It has a subcategories where you can discuss selected topics, but it's a lot of noise, especially if you are a member of like multiple groups, which on Discord you have like hundreds of them.
And then
So what's your experience?
You go for vacation for 3 days and then come back and have 20,000 unwritten messages. So good luck. Yeah, my experience with tooling, we are more satisfied with tooling because again, it's more like professional tooling, and we're trying to explain also. Everybody is in the community explaining that, okay, this is not for moms and dads. This is like really, you need to understand what you're voting, discussing. This is a risk you need to take. And in this sense, GitHub is perfect tooling. So we have a lot of documentation there. So discussions on Discord, yeah, it works well. So far, I think it's good. But if I imagine this going, our community going to something 100 times, 1,000 times bigger, of course it's going to be problems. So, and I take it positively. I think it's problem of growth. It's not problem of it's not structural problem. It's like internet at the beginning. Yeah, when I have first email, I had to plug in my phone, then put my modem, spend 20 minutes before I send it.
So for me, DAOs feel like they're like in very early stage where most of the organization is flat and all the voting is done directly. So if I hold like 1% of the token supply, I have 1% vote on the DAO. But my bet would be that DAOs would be transformed over time like to more of like corporate structures where you have like selected representatives responsible for certain areas rather than seeking a funding for some concrete sub-DAO on the main level from everybody. What are you thinking about yourself?
I don't necessarily tend to agree because I was working in different countries, and in some countries the corporate culture like more flat, in like Holland, for example. So and it shows that it's efficient, it's working, it's cool, and the DAO is just easier way to implement those things. In some cultures, cases, countries, there's more hierarchical structure, and sometimes it's needed, really needed. So that's also possible. So I don't think it's going to converge to one. I think it's going to depend, and flat organizations are amazing as well.
And can you be like more specific, like where you have seen like flat organizations and how many people were involved and
for example, our team DAO, so it's sometimes from 10 to like 30 people. Sometimes if more joining, I think it was like almost 50, and it's pretty flat. So the discussions, everybody can propose anything, comment on everything, so it's manageable still, but it's working in the best way as a development or something, like IT development. So it's working super good. Everybody has something to say, everybody discussing, some junior may come with great idea. So there is no barriers, people feel relaxed, all kind of positives. But I can imagine if you have something like our protocol DAO, it's more professional, it's more serious, and you want to have certain sub-DAOs, clear structure and clear decision mechanism. For example, one thing we discussed right now, that in order to have more voting power, you need to lock your tokens for longer. So the logic is very simple. So if you lock your tokens for longer, so you cannot just take them, dump them, sell them, whatever. You can do anything. You cannot do anything with them. So, and it's suppose that you have much longer horizon of planning, of voting, of decision taking. So you should have more voting power.
So I can decide pretty much if I lock my tokens for 1 year, I have 1 vote, but if I lock for 4 years, I have 4 votes, yeah?
Yes, and if you lock it for 2 days, probably you have very few votes because you're not putting skin in the game.
Okay, understand. Does the audience have any question? Okay. There is a question at the end.
Hello, how you doing? I just wanted to ask a question about like how do you think like the DAO structure can slow down innovation, especially if it's like maybe a new project, and maybe decentralizing the decision-making process can make things take longer than usual versus kind of a founding team having a vision and kind of trying to execute on that initially, then moving over to a DAO once things are more mature and established. If that makes sense.
So the question, if I understood correctly, was about if the party, if Andre and Jan are not worried that given the DAO's decision-making is slow, whether it should be held in like the founder's hands like longer. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like, at what point would a project decide to move to a DAO? If that makes, earlier on.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I can start.
Yeah.
There are trade-offs, 100%. Like, if you have very small team, like let's say 4 people, it's much easier to agree on something and just like push for it and do it. But there is also the risk that you work with wrong assumptions because you are just taking opinion of 4 people other than like maybe take like consideration of 100, and they might have various experiences, therefore they can actually spot something what you are missing there and what can like cause like huge risks. So the trade-off there, I think it's like, yes, you can move fast with small number of people and like, you know, maybe just one person have all the decision power, but maybe you don't move that far. So that like when you use the DAO structure and you really consider opinion of many, like there is lower risk of like not considering all the options. So I think you need to balance between that. And I think your second part of the question was like when project should turn into the DAO. I think it needs to be kind of natural. Start as a small team, start developing something, and bring more and more people into it, not start with 10,000. Like, you know, the centralization probably at the beginning makes much more sense to kind of develop the POC, MVP, and then move like with larger number of people, maybe, you know, develop it like further and further.
And I think it's also a concern of regulatory, because at some point you are forced to decentralize, and you want, and with the decentralization and giving away the tokens, you are showing to the regulators that it's this protocol is a public good, and there is not like single entity profiting from existence of this protocol. So I think this is like one of the very significant cases why there are DAOs which are distributing the token holders to such a wide range of audience. Andrei, what do you think? Is that?
I'm maximalist here, so I think it should be as much decentralized as possible from the day one.
Yeah.
The question when the day one should happen, so when you should deploy the DAO. And I think, of course, not when you have 2 people, because then you just achieve nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, most of the projects, they get funding, they have seed round, something like this. And most of the projects, again, they take only valuable investors, contributors to this round. So, and that makes already a big diversified group with skin in the game. And that's the point where this day one should happen. So I think from that point, it should be fully decentralized. It will be a little bit more difficult to put everybody to consensus, to let everybody to vote, but it's about game theory. So if you have a mechanism like this, you reward active participants, you reward people who are there for longer, naturally, then it will work. But I think it should be like as decentralized as possible, because that's the purpose. Yeah, I don't agree necessarily with your first pillar, that decentralized autonomous organization or decentralized. I think they should be decentralized. So and we should try to make it as decentralized as possible. But not, of course, not of them are.
Okay, but then the question comes, how do you make the game theory work in a case where you have like thousands or 10,000s, unique shareholders or token holders in the DAO case, and how do you incentivize them to bring value to the DAO? Because it feels like you have a very minor skin in the game in that case, which means you are not very much incentivized to do so.
Well, you can incentivize them. So you can reward active participation. You can announce it in front and say, okay, everybody who's going to vote, actively vote. Doesn't matter how you vote, but you should participate. You have rewards. You have more. You bring something to protocol, so you have more tokens of this protocol. And that's the idea of liquidity mining or any mining. So miners used to be somebody who supports Bitcoin blockchain, but nowadays miners everyone who supports a protocol in one way or another. And active voting, it's a lot of support. So you can allocate this type of programs and discriminate between long-term participants who are there with locked tokens and short-term participants. That's all about game theory. That's why I mentioned game theory as one of the very important things.
And looking at the Opium protocol DAO right now, what would you say is required for the DAO to scale like 1,000 active contributors?
I think traction in product itself. So derivatives have no real traction yet in DeFi. So everybody are talking that now it's time, and we see yes, indeed, it's pick up in centralized derivatives, and it's going to follow probably decentralized derivatives. So when it's going to happen, it's going to be more natural. So now you can. Now there is some mass of people, so thousands of people probably, in case of Opium, but I would not do it synthetically. I wouldn't ask people to join just because to join. So I think it's 1,000 people is enough. But when we see a pickup of product derivatives, DeFi adopting them, so it's going to be natural flow.
Okay. And Jan, you mentioned you have 19,000 members in the DAO. How many of the 19,000 is actually like actively contributing?
I don't have the exact number, but like I think that's the difference between like different type of the DAOs, or even like the sub DAO. I'm leading like this professional DAO. We do have, let's say, 100, 120 now contributors, 90% active, because the reason, like, and that 10% is just like that they joined like last week, because they came to contribute, to work, kind of. In the social DAO, what is the bank class or friends with benefits, like it's to be like part of the group. It's not to be like active per se. You just maybe be active on some event or something, but you won't be active in the DAO. So there the percentage is much lower. It will be probably like 10% will be core team and 30% will be like that they are active somehow.
And in terms of like the reward you are paying off to the core contributors, how does a typical like compensation scheme look like?
So again, very different. But like across the DAOs, and I work with other DAOs as well, like there are salaries as well. Like, so some DAOs pay salaries for like full-time jobs, so very traditional. But mostly there is like compensation, what I see, like for something. So you do integration $5,000. It's like there was a proposal that if you develop this type of integration, you get this money. And basically people take it and do it, which is kind of also very similar to like bounties system. So basically they just pick the bounties, develop it, get compensation. Or in the social DAOs, there is also like a coordinate, it's called. It's basically you put the money into like one big pocket and then distribute it to the contributors based on like how much involved they've been. So let's say every month it's go $10,000 into the pot, and then basically they come in and they distribute votes to each other. Like, I think Dusan done well, so I give you 10 votes, and Andrei, you were not that active, so 1 vote. So you get like bigger piece, 10 times bigger piece than Andrei from that.
Okay, so the participation is actively measured, and there is a budget set for rewarding the participation like bucket, and then it's like pro rata split to people who are contributing.
Yeah.
And okay. What about in the Opium DAO?
Exactly the same. So sometimes people go to Opium DAO and say, we want to do it this community project. Can we ask for this amount of tokens or grant or cash or anything else? And then there's discussion and then it's approved or not. So exactly the same. And within our team, Opium team DAO, also similar, but it's mostly decided on the calls, team calls, community calls, and then everybody know who is contributing what, and then there is proposal which needs to be signed by critical mass of the people, and then it's done.
Okay. So, thank you very much, Jan and Andrei, for the discussion. So, we have run out of the time, but again, it was a pleasure to having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrei. Thank you, Jan.